Over the past year, I've been watching the prices of Sony FS7s drop. And when I saw that this camera, which was once selling for $7,000, could be purchased for $1,500 or less, I decided it was time to upgrade my Sony FS5 to the Sony FS7. And I bought not one, but two FS7s, both very low hours. One had about 500 hours and one had about 600 hours, both in excellent condition, and both were purchased from very reputable companies. And I paid about $1,500 for each one. Now, I was so excited to get these cameras and I really thought I was going to love using them. But that excitement died very quickly when I received the first camera and I started shooting video with it. Right off the bat, there were problems with the camera reading the media cards. Now, right before I bought the camera, I had purchased two brand new Sony 240 gigabyte and 120 gigabyte XQD cards just to use with these cameras. And I formatted both of them in the camera. But every second or third time I removed the cards from the camera to review the footage, when I put them back in, I would get an error message telling me that the cards were almost full, even though there was only about 5 minutes of footage on each card. Or I would get an error message telling me that the media needed to be restored, even though I just formatted the cards in the same camera an hour ago. But I figured maybe it was just a minor glitch, so I reset all of the camera's factory settings, I made sure the firmware was up to date, and I expected the issue to be fixed. But when I put the cards back in the camera, I was still getting the same error messages telling me that the media cards were almost full. So then I figured if I record for a couple minutes, the camera would realize that the media cards had plenty of storage available and the error message would go away. But after a couple minutes, the camera stopped recording and I got a message telling me that the media cards were full. So despite the media cards having over 100 gigabytes of storage available, the camera would not record on them. Then I figured maybe one of the media cards was the problem. So I tried shooting with only one card in the camera and I continued getting the same error messages for both cards. Now you may have noticed that this is a very unbiased video, and I'm one of the few YouTubers who's not afraid to criticize a major manufacturer like Sony. And if you want more unbiased reviews of photo and video equipment, click below to subscribe to this channel. At that point, I wiped both of the media cards clean and reformatted them, hoping this would solve the issue. After reformatting, I recorded 2 minutes of footage, and at that point, they were working fine. But once I took the cards out and put them back into the camera, I once again got the warning message telling me that the media cards only had 2 minutes of storage left. So I just reformatted the cards yet again and continued with my testing of the camera's other features. Now this time I shoot a 40-minute video clip so I could test the image quality of the camera, and while I'm reviewing the footage, I noticed that around the 20-minute mark, the image becomes significantly brighter, even though the camera was set to full manual. When I saw this, I figured there was a problem with one of the lights I was using, or maybe the small amount of natural lighting getting in just got much brighter, like maybe there was cloud cover when I first started shooting and then the sky cleared up. So I didn't worry about it at the time and I continued testing the camera. But as the day went on, so did the false warnings telling me that the media cards were full when they weren't. and I couldn't get them to go away. So at that point, I decided to send the first camera back, and I enthusiastically waited for my second FS7 to arrive. A couple days later, the second camera arrives. I do a factory reset, make sure the firmware is up to date, and I set the camera to the preferred XAVI setting. But then I put my XQD cards in, and guess what? I get a warning message telling me that there's only 2 minutes of storage left on the cards. So I just reformat the cards in the camera and begin going through my testing procedures. But the testing procedures don't go well, because with this camera, not only am I getting the error message about the media cards being full, now every hour or so, I get the execute APR message as well. I just deal with it and continue testing the camera. This video about the Sony FS7 is brought to you by Porsche Art Prints by Arc Driver Automotive Photography. These unique Porsche art prints are a great way to improve the aesthetics in any room in your house, and a great way to help support this channel. They feature museum quality printing on heavy duty paper that has a partly glossy and partly matte finish. You can check out the entire collection by clicking on the link in the description below. But when I go to review the footage, once again around the 20-minute mark, the footage gets much brighter, and this time there's no doubt that it's the camera that's causing the problem and not any of the light sources I'm using. So I make a note of this and I begin editing the footage on Final Cut Pro. But as I'm editing, every 10 to 15 minutes, Final Cut Pro freezes up and needs to be forced quit and restarted. Even after multiple restarts, Final Cut Pro keeps freezing up. So I trash my software preferences thinking that this will help. But even after that, I continue having the same problem. Now at this point, I still really want to make the FS7 work for me. So I watch a few videos on the best way to set up the camera. I make all the changes that everyone recommends, and then I redo my testing procedure, hoping everything will be fixed. But I'm still having all the same problems as before. So I called the company I bought this camera from and I told them that I was going to be returning it. Now, I don't know how these cameras functioned when they were new, but I do know that I purchased 2 different cameras from 2 different places that were both in excellent condition and had very low operating hours. And they both had the exact same problems. So what I do know is that these cameras were not built to last. But let's say hypothetically that these cameras were working perfectly. Would I think this camera was worth purchasing? Even with all the problems, I did manage to shoot and edit 2 videos with the FS7. But as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I also have a Sony FS5. And while the video quality of the FS7 is slightly better than the FS5, what you have to deal with to get that slightly better footage simply isn't worth it. The FS7 file sizes are enormous and the camera requires XQD cards. And if you're going to be shooting for a few hours, you're going to need $1,000 worth of cards. Plus, the enormous file sizes of the FS7 footage creates additional problems when transferring, storing, editing, and exporting the footage, and the camera's increased size, weight, and power requirements over the FS5 aren't a great selling point either. So even if these cameras were working perfectly, I still wouldn't have been impressed with them when compared to my FS5. So my final takeaway is that the FS7 might have been a great camera when it was new, but as they've aged, they've become riddled with problems. And when you consider that there are smaller cameras that are less of a hassle to create content with, that get footage that looks nearly as good, there's really not any good reason to purchase an FS7 today. Thanks for checking out this video, and for more unbiased photo and video equipment reviews, click here to subscribe.